What's going on, guys? This is the Fullstack Bro coming at you with another video for today. Today's video, we're going to be talking about what a full stack developer does, what skills do you need to acquire to become full stack, and why they are so important. So let me give you a brief background about me as a developer that has transitioned from a web designer to full stack. So I've been full stack for about 4+ years. Is working on building applications from start to finish. That includes the front end and back end all in one go. So when becoming full stack, you have to understand that there are a lot of understanding when it comes to technology and the stack that you're going to be using. You are now responsible for the front end and the back end, and you have to understand both so that you can get your app or website up and running. So in essence, a full stack developer deals with all of that. They are very well versed in how an app should work from start to finish and have the means to build something from scratch and not have to go about delegating some of that work to other developers or other people on the team. It's always good to start off with a basic foundation of wherever you want to start, whether it's front end or back end. And if you want the two to converge, that's where you have to do a little bit more learning. When it comes to skills that are required, basically what you need to understand is the front end. That's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Those three are key for front end development. If you want to jump into a framework, there's a couple frameworks that are out there like React.js, Vue, Angular, that provides more functionality and enhanceability to making reusable components. So instead of writing out your code from start to finish and managing all the components and the bells and whistles that you built into the app, you could actually rely on a third-party library to provide that functionality for you so that you save a lot of time on development. Okay, so when it comes to becoming full stack, the front end, you need to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I will spend at least a month or two on these. And as soon as you understand the basics, just start building. Just start building something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to work out the box, right? Then you could start building out and expanding the functionality as you go. And that's going to come with time and the amount of projects that you're going to be working on. So just be patient. No one gets it right the first time, but if you stay consistent and you put in the practice, you're definitely going to notice some changes and you're going to start refactoring your code to where it's in a good place and you have a standard going. Okay, and then also the back end. So the back end is more, like I said in the beginning of the video, APIs. So setting up APIs to communicate with the front end in different areas of your app. So if you are dealing with users and pulling in user profile information or authenticating a user to your app, a user API would work best in that scenario. When you're dealing with different features that need a database that stores all the information in that database, and then it is referenced based off of the user that is using the app, that's another area that you need to look into as well. Creating databases and also creating relationships between those databases, understanding indexes, the importance of having an index, a foreign key within your database table, and what you would use to pull that data out of your database. What kind of queries are you going to create to do this? And this is where relationship databases come in handy. Creating a foreign key that sits in one table that you could reference in another would allow you to join them together to where you could pull bits and pieces of data from each table and create a uniform dashboard or a data set that you could pull in from the back end to the front end and manipulate that on the front end so that it's able to build out the feature that you have envisioned and how it should work. That's the difference between being a regular developer or front-end developer and back-end. They only work on two separate things all the time. With full stack, you'll get the full flow of my front end. This is my UI. This is how I'm going to build it. These are the endpoints that I need that are referenced to the back end. And then once my app loads up, it should be able to pull that data from the API, right, which is your middle layer, that calls the database and pulls data from those database tables based off of the query that you set up to pull all that data and then ship that back to the front end. Okay. So it's essential that you learn back-end terminology and pick out a language that would work for you. There's a bunch of different languages that will help with this. So you got Python, you got Ruby on Rails, you got Java, Node.js. It doesn't matter. This is just more of a preference in terms of your research on what you want to do. You have to understand what exactly is going to help with a need to get something up and running, like an app up and running, and how easy it's going to be to develop on that and not spend so much time doing the research and go through the paces. So again, front end, back end are key to becoming full stack, and understanding those basics from each category will help you get there a lot quicker. This is going to take months of consistency with practicing how to code and making mistakes as you're coding. As you start to code, you're going to notice that there's going to be a lot of errors that's going to be popping up, at least on the front end. And then you're going to run into issues where you can't get data from the back end for some reason. So you got to troubleshoot that. Once you understand what you're doing wrong, it's going to be very easy to build out additional functionality as you go along. And just keep in mind that this is not a race, it's a marathon. Take your time, because the more you take your time, the easier it will be for you to be successful as a full stack developer and build your own app if you choose to. I'm also going to talk about the day in the life of a full stack developer. Now, I already talked about the skills that you need, but what exactly does a full stack developer do on a day-to-day basis? Well, for me, I could talk about it from my personal experience because I am a full stack developer. Okay, so usually my day-to-day is working on features or bugs that were found using the app, and then new features that we need to build out to extend the functionality of it. So when I'm looking at my queue for the week, I always look at what's the hardest task that I need to get through this week and prioritize that as the first thing that I need to do. And then break that down into smaller pieces so that I could check off little wins until I get the feature done. And that's going to help me with development in the time I'm spending on developing something, to where it makes it easier for other projects down the line that I need to work on. When it comes to working on projects, at least in my experience, I've noticed that prioritizing my work as opposed to just working on the fly helps me set up exactly what I need to do for that week and get it done and not have it spill over to the next week. And I'm a big believer into setting a schedule to where you're sitting down for 4 hours, at least for me, that works for me, of deep work where I'm working on that one particular task and breaking down and working through everything that needs to get done and setting up the schedule for next week and the following week and make sure that everything is in line for any other projects that I have on the table. Without that schedule, I noticed that a lot of my work would bleed into the next week, and then I would have to prioritize that, and then it will bleed into the following week. And it was just a bunch of chaos. So I wasn't getting a lot of work done. The time that I saved by doing this has been tenfold. Like I've gotten so much work done within a 1 to 4 hour window that I could work on other things that need to be prioritized, and then also have the time to leave the house, do whatever I need to do, have that accountability that, hey, I got this done. If there's any bugs that come with it in terms of when QA gets a hold of it and they're testing it and they find bugs, I'm able to fix that and get it out the door, right? Like production wouldn't be held up because of that. So just having that mindset to schedule things out, just not with just your projects, but then also when it comes to life and doing things every day that you need to get done and setting yourself accountable for doing it, you're going to notice that you're going to be making a lot more progress as opposed to just thinking about it and saying, I'll get to it later. So a schedule is definitely going to help with your prioritization and your coding ability. So, when it comes to debugging code and then, testing that feature, making sure that it works so that QA is able to test it and providing good documentation on that, There's also, with the full stack developer, what they do is they pretty much would collaborate with different team members. And I'm not just saying, with other developers. You have to work with the product managers, you got to work with the design team, you got to work with other users that are using the app internally. And so when it comes to collaboration, that's very, very important. Like, you have to know how to collaborate between those teams, because the way you would collaborate with the engineer is not necessarily going to be the same as you collaborate with the product designer or a product manager. These are going to be different. You're going to be talking at a high level of being an engineer, talking with the developer on the technical requirements of what needs to be done and understanding the code structure and all that. Then with the product designer, you're going to be talking about how things are laid out from a visual standpoint, and provides feedback in terms of how things should be laid out, how things should function. If you look at usually what a product designer would use is Figma, and it allows you to interact with the design a little bit and provide a holistic view of the way the UI should look, in a sense. And you would go back and forth in terms of, is this feasible from a technical standpoint? Why are we doing it this way? A lot of different questions will pop up from a developer's mindset. You're going to be thinking as a developer, and then also as a user using the app, what makes the most sense, and having that brainstorming session and collaborating in that way. When it comes to product, you got to talk about requirements, right? And then from a technical standpoint, you have to be keen in terms of whether the requirements make sense from a technical standpoint, whether you need to evaluate how the requirements would affect other areas of the app, if that is the case. How long is it going to take to build out those requirements? And just make sure you have the right questions, so that when it comes to development and as you're building things out, it doesn't necessarily slow down development when you hit a showstopper. Something that to where you can't get past this one requirement because it's going to cause a lot of work to be done for other areas of the product. So having that conversation beforehand, before you even start writing code for any of these features, is always good to have a good conversation with product. Communication is key. Work on your soft skills. That is very, very important to make it as a full stack developer. Because what's going to happen is you're going to waste a lot of time not just thinking that whatever's there in your requirements, that's exactly what it's going to be. And whatever is built by the UI team is exactly what it's going to be. Never had that mindset. Always think outside the box and make sure that you keep them accountable for your time and what you're going to be working on, so that everybody's happy at the end of the day. Another thing is the challenges, right? Being a full stack developer seems like it's a great thing in essence, right? Because you get so much more responsibility as opposed to a software developer or software engineer. You now are responsible for front end and back end infrastructure. So for example, the challenge that I noticed was that there's so much to learn out there. There's so many different languages that you could pick up and learn and apply it to your tech stack. And that's great, right? There's endless amounts of learning, but then at the end of the day, you got to know when to stop. You got to know when to make a pivot to another language. Unless you're just trialing out that language and you're trying to see whether it's going to be beneficial for you, then that's where you're spending a lot of time and resources just figuring out whether that's the route to go. And then your mind's going to change and you're going to move on to something else. My philosophy on this is to at least learn 3 to 5 languages max that you are proficient in. And if there's something new, evaluate it, but don't spend too much time digging yourself in a hole to where you're writing in that language now, you think you know it, and you're going to realize that it wasn't really something that you needed in the long term, right? It's something that could solve one problem, but it doesn't solve all problems. And we're looking for languages that will solve all our problems and that is easy to implement and doesn't require a lot of learning to get it done. So you could fall into that trap. I fell into that trap before, learning different languages and trying to understand, like, okay, is this going to help me or not? And then I'll go down that rabbit hole. I feel like, okay, I'm confident that this is going to help me with this particular project. Come to find out, it doesn't. It doesn't solve the problem that I needed to solve. So this will save you a lot of time and a lot of headache if you stick to 3 to 5 languages that you're proficient in. You don't have to be an expert at it. You have 2 to 3 languages that you're an expert at. The other 2 would just be in your back pocket if you need it. And then also, like, everything is on you essentially, because you're a full stack developer. You can't delegate your work to a front end dev. You can't delegate your work to a back end dev, right? You're working on both. So it's either way. I honestly feel like you should be working on one particular thing that you're really good at. Being full stack is just a plus, but ultimately, if you want to be successful, you have to focus on one thing and spend as much time to master that one thing, and make sure that there's going to be growth within that one thing. It doesn't matter if it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that one thing will always gradually become better, and you will get better at it as well. This learning is a positive. Being full stack and learning both of those are great, but then you won't have the means to delegate that work unless you really want to or have to. If you really want to become full stack, like I said in the beginning of the video, you need to learn the front end, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, understand the key concepts there, learn how to build a website, learn how to build a web app using a framework, understand those key differences, what's important, how to write clean code, how to spot tech debt, which is bad, poorly maintained code, and you're going to be able to explain to the recruiters, interviewers, right, for different companies, what you could do, and showcase your work and actually provide an explanation as to how you went about building the app and how you cleaned it up, and give a breakdown within the code itself. Those are pluses. If you know how to explain your code, that's what they like to see. So just make sure that you know what you're talking about and know how to code and understand the key concepts. That's very important. So if you want to become full stack, front end is important. The back end, understanding APIs, databases, server side scripting languages like Python, Ruby, Java, Node.js. Just make sure you understand that, because that's going to definitely help you transition between your front end work and your back end work. Like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I want to see you in the comments whether you guys are on the full stack journey, what your means of becoming full stack, and what kind of technologies are you learning to become full stack. So appreciate you guys' time, and we'll talk soon.